Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Grad Centric podcast. This week I'm excited. So typically I do these short audio segments and video segments on college planning topics. Well, this week we're going to do an interview. I have my good friend Val on with us, and we're going to talk about college essays, admissions essays in particular. And she is the guru in this space. And so I'm excited to pick her brain about what she knows when it comes to college essays. So first off, just tell us a little bit about your business, Writing Help KC.
Sure. My name is Val Cervarich, and as Jason mentioned, I own Writing Help KC, and all of my editing services are focused on helping people feel more confident about their writing abilities. So when it comes to admissions essays, personal statements, scholarship essays, all of that are really crucial to your journey. So I help not only with the grammar and the mechanics, but also just the overall flow and organization, and to make sure you have a compelling message for your audience.
Absolutely. And I know from working with families throughout the college planning process that this portion that we focus effort on admissions essays can be very time intensive, very complex, and crucial when it comes especially to prestigious college admissions, highly selective
Mhm.
colleges. They're putting a lot of scrutiny on this step in the process. Families get stressed out, they want to know best practices and tips. And that's why, in some respects, hiring somebody like me or hiring somebody like you, Val, can be a real aid to the process when they're looking to get the best chance that they can to get into the schools that they want to. So obviously, admissions essays are crucial to scholarships and admissions. So what are a few of those best practices that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. So when reading these important essays, a few things I want to see are personality while maintaining professionalism, of course, your story rather than a list of accomplishments. So thinking about pivotal moments in your life, things that shaped you and who you are and what field you might want to pursue later on, making sure it's organized and it flows well. And then obviously a polished and proofread project. So that's one thing that I think most people consider editing to be the proofreading, where it's just, making sure the commas and periods are in the right place and everything, but it goes beyond that. You want to make sure that whatever you're writing is directed to your audience, and that it's compelling and it helps you to stand out. So that's a lot of the outside perspective I provide as an editor.
And I love that. And maybe that's not so obvious to the families who are listening to this podcast, that this whole process is not so much about just giving you grammar and spelling insights. Of course, that's a piece of it. And
Mhm.
you need to have a flawless essay in terms of formatting. But the other piece of this is making your true self shine. And
Mhm.
that's the piece of it that I think is way more complex, harder to hone in on, besides the technical piece that some students need help with. Although I will say on the flip side of that, of course, as you know, the technical side is really important. Sometimes
Mhm.
high school students, and it's not their fault, just don't know what it means to write at a college level. And so if you
Mhm.
don't have that proficiency or that technical skill set, it's going to be almost impossible to get into a highly selective university that's looking at those things and highly scrutinizing the technical components in your level of writing. That's very important because, again, you may be going to campus and having an on campus interview or interviewing with an alumni, but generally speaking, the admissions officer is not going to see you face to face when they sit down to read your admissions essay. And so what's there is going to be your representative in this
Mhm.
process. And so it's very, very crucial. Again, I find that families need help in kind of a couple key areas. Of course, financial aid, but the admissions essay piece is huge, and just keeping people on track throughout this crucial portion of the college planning process is very critical for success. Okay,
Yes.
perfect. And that's a good tie into the next question, which is when should students reach out for professional help? Of course, we can get a book at Barnes and Noble, or we can get it at Amazon. We can maybe talk to a friend about how they wrote their essay. We can maybe have a group session. Many things that we could do without bringing in a professional. But when is
Mhm.
that time, or why would a family ask a professional to help in this area?
So I think, as you mentioned, prestigious colleges or universities are going to have a higher threshold that you have to meet, right? And so outside perspective is so helpful. When you're living something day to day, and if you don't necessarily have the writing background that you need to make something really compelling and captivating to the admissions representatives, that's when you want to reach out to a professional. And even if you just feel stuck, or you've written something and you don't feel confident in it, that's the outside perspective and expertise that an editor can provide. And one thing that's really important to me is that I'm either interviewing them, the student, through Zoom, a phone call, or email, to get to know who they are, because that is what I want to know. All of these applicants may look very similar on paper, where you have the same extracurriculars on top of great grades and everything, but that essay is something that can help you stand out, and you want to make sure that it's done in a way that is vulnerable, that shares your story, what makes you unique, and include some moments that really maybe you don't necessarily think of as pivotal, or something that you would want to include. If I'm asking you those questions about that, then that can help you get to that information. So that's where it goes beyond the grammar and the punctuation and things like that, which of course are super important. But the outside perspective and someone challenging you to really dig in and think about what makes you who you are is exactly what you need and what you should put in your essays.
Yeah. And two things I want to highlight out of what you just said. One is the best writers in the world have editors, right? And so we know that many of the students that are shooting for highly selective college are great writers. And that's
Mhm.
not the point. Maybe some parents would say, my kid is a great writer, they don't need any help. Well, again, the greatest writers in the world are using editors because they want that additional perspective on what they're doing.
Mhm.
If your student is a good writer, it certainly wouldn't help to use a process when it comes to just refining the voice, if nothing else, if they're technically proficient. The second thing I would say, and I've done many podcast episodes on this, the cost of college and the increasing cost of college. Why is it so expensive? How expensive is it? Many
Mhm.
families are shocked to know that the college a 4-year college process living on campus now is easily $100,000, $200,000. And so when it comes to the return on investment there, that's what I focus on, the return on investment. So anytime that we are going and buying a home, spending a lot of money for a home, we're hiring a realtor to help us through that process. We're hiring professionals to check out the house before we purchase it. Anytime we're thinking about investments, we're hiring a financial advisor. We have a CPA that gives us advice on taxes and our business. And so when it comes to college, many families just forget that this is a massive investment. And so
Mhm.
getting professionals and partners to come into that process to give guidance can quite literally save tens of thousands or maybe even more, picking the right school and making sure that you're a good fit within the freshman class profile. So
Mhm.
professionals certainly can't help, and I would agree with everything you just said. So next thing is I know a bit about your business. You work a lot with graduate students, and in this podcast, I talk a lot about undergraduate. But tell us a little bit about what are the trends you're seeing in the graduate space? What are the things that you think are best practices for the graduate student level?
Sure. Again, I think that the lack of story or compelling argument behind their writing is often an issue. So, graduate students are pursuing a topic in depth, they're studying it sometimes for years if you're working on a PhD. They're really an expert in that area. But when it comes to writing an article, especially in the hard sciences, like for an academic journal, when you have to go and turn that into something that speaks to a more general audience, that's going to be a challenge. So I see a lot of really technically focused writing. It may be communicating exactly what it needs to for someone else to go replicate that and do their own twist. So we continue to build on that knowledge. But if you need to explain how important this is, and we saw this a lot through the pandemic, like there's a lot of confusion about the science and how it's communicated to the public and how people are reacting to things. And so there's this big push for science communication to make this sometimes challenging information more approachable and easier for the general public to understand. So, really taking a step back and thinking about the audience is something I recommend for graduate students, for undergrads. No matter what you're writing, you want to make sure that you understand who your audience is and what they need and what they know. Um, Especially for graduate students, they get really, they're living this day-to-day life in a lingo and a language in the lab or wherever they're working on a campus. Um, and they forget that other people might not know those things. And so just taking a step back, thinking about what your audience doesn't know, making sure that you're addressing that, and then also adding an element of story and sharing, appealing to emotions and sharing why this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually made me think of a great future podcast episode where we talk about the difference between undergrad and graduate school, because the
Yeah.
emphasis on research and technical skills. I think most of my listeners and even the public wouldn't understand that it's not just the next step in the undergraduate education, more classes, maybe more advanced topics. It really is starting to focus on research skill and more technical skill sets that you
Mhm.
don't cover at the undergraduate level. So that'd be a great future podcast episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a bonus question for you too. I know that this isn't the only business that you run. So tell us about. I know you have one other one that you're working on. What is that business, and what do you do there?
Sure. So I also run Business Savvy Teachers, and this is something I started this past fall. And my goal is to help teachers to run a freelance or online business to help them have more creative and financial freedom. So there are a lot of things that you go through as a teacher, especially in K 12 and also at the collegiate level, where you have all these rules and testing and standards and things that you have to focus on all the time. But being a former educator and starting my own editing business, I have realized that teachers are really well suited to be entrepreneurs, and they can use their expertise and knowledge in a unique way to serve others and expand their impact beyond the classroom. So if they want to do that and earn extra money, then the extra money is a bonus, right?
That's great. And well, my story. I teach at the collegiate level, and so I would agree with everything you've just said. I think teachers have unique skill sets that position them well to run their own side gigs or even their own
Mhm.
full-time business if they're eventually wanting to stay home with their kids or what have you. So I'm glad you're offering that valuable service. That's why I wanted to make sure we got it in towards the
Yeah.
end of this episode. Thank you for sharing about that. Now, this is also my plug session. So how can you get to know Val a bit more or follow what she's doing? She's got her handle is at Writing Help KC. That's Instagram and Facebook. Her
Mhm.
website is writinghelpkc.com. And then, of course, if you're working with us here at Grad Metrics, we're going to be interfacing with Val when it comes to essays and working with professionals throughout that process, simply because we know there's a huge value add there. So
Mhm.
excited to finish this one up, but I know it won't be the end. We'll probably have you on and ask you more questions when it comes to essays. This is really valuable information. But thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.